Hello there, and welcome to the Thank You Fellows podcast. My name is Caleb Keith, and today I am joined by Bruce Hillman of our regular hosts of the show to interview Blake Flattley and Flame about the new album out with 1517 Music titled Freedom Lessons. Links in the show note below where you can listen to that. You can stream it on Apple Music, Spotify, or I'm pretty sure wherever else you can stream your music, maybe YouTube Music, some of those other places. We'll make sure we have all of the right links for that. In fact, I'm sure many of our listeners have seen from 1517 some of the emails and social media posts about it. So if you've checked it out, this will be an episode about that album, about the inspiration for that album, what the goals are for it, some questions about the tracks inside of it, and just a good conversation about, why would 1517 pursue publishing an album like this? Why are we doing a hip-hop album? Seems maybe pretty unusual to some Thank You Fellows listeners, and so I think we'll be able to answer those questions in today's episode. The Thank You Fellows is brought to you by the 1517 Podcast Network of shows. You can go to 1517.org/podcast to see all of our shows there. Remember to look in the description. There's show notes below with links to things like this album, but also we keep it up to date with links for many of the things going on at 1517 right now. All right, guys. So we have an album called Freedom Lessons. That's pretty spot on for 1517's brand, with our mission to, declare and defend that you are forgiven and free on account of Christ alone. Why do we have a hip-hop album titled Freedom Lessons, and what is like the base content of Freedom Lessons?
Well, firstly, it's all Blake's fault. So I want to put the blame there first before we get started. But yeah, if you want to take it from there, Blake, I just had to get that off the chest first.
Well, thanks. Sure. Why Freedom Lessons? Okay, so we set out to, I approached Flame with this idea about making an album that he'd been making records that were exploring different content from Lutheran theology. And I said, hey, what if we made one that was where we took the Catechism and we made a record that created music that expressed the ideas found in the Catechism. And he agreed, and which grateful, thank you. And so we said, okay, we want to start this on the right foot. So what's the best way to start a hip-hop record based on the Catechism? We got some seminary professors together, and that's where most hip-hop records start, I think, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Certainly the best-selling ones, right?
Yeah. Yes, right. Yeah. And so we got Dr. Robert Kolb and Dr. James Nestigan and Dr. Scott Keith all agreed to get in a Zoom room with us, which was just a chance for us to sort of ask them questions and to say, what if we don't cover this? Are we going to say, are they going to say, you missed the point? You missed you messed up. And as part of that conversation was unfolding, which you can kind of hear a snippet of it on the first track of the record, Dr. Nestigan said, freedom lessons. That's what the Catechism is. It's a collection of freedom lessons. And so they gave us some great insight and set us really on the right track, I think, for making what we decided at that moment, shortly after, would be called Freedom Lessons.
Yeah. Yep, we knew that was the title as soon as we heard it.
That's great.
It's like that magic.
Yeah, I think, it's a little bit tragic and a little bit amazing timing for it too, because, Jim did pass away this year, and he had such an amazing influence on my life personally and on 1517 as a whole, and certainly helping through his influence to set the direction of what 1517 does with its content. And so I think kind of, an amazing way to honor his legacy too, in a sense, by being able to do a catechism project this year with a title inspired from what he was able to teach you guys in that session. Flame, here's a question for you. So people who, maybe not everybody's familiar with you, but people who are probably know that you have come over to Lutheranism from a more Reformed background. As you made that transition, was the catechism, like Luther's small catechism in particular, a essential piece of that? Was it an impactful piece of that? How has that been there on that journey to and now in Lutheranism?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say no. It wasn't my first exposure to Lutheran thought, but when I discovered it and sort of the goal behind it, in terms of Luther really seemed to have this burden to take these lofty ideas and package them in a way that the average person can grasp. And once I discovered the small catechism, I was drawn by that. So that was the thing that when Blake brought the concept to me, I was like, man, this is perfect, because sometimes it could be overwhelming when you're coming from different spaces and moving into Lutheran thought, and you're trying to wrap your mind around, how do you process Christianity now? How do you take these big concepts and use them? So for that reason, I thought, man, this was a perfect time to, collaborate that goal with our goal, in today's times, and use music as a way to do that. So that was my point of contact, was just later on finding out Luther's, sort of idea behind it, and then connecting with that.
So Blake, you're probably more familiar with this, but the catechism has been put to music in ways in the past. Sometimes there are, I think I can remember from when I was growing up, there was like a CD from Concordia Publishing House that was basically just the text of the catechism sung, right? So that people could, I think memorize it to song. How did you, this album is not just the text of the small catechism. So was there a challenge in incorporating the theology? Because you had to basically synthesize the theology from it, right? And then now express that. I have to imagine there's especially some challenge in getting it to have some flow, have some lyricism and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we said essentially when we first started, so there's Flame, a producer by the name of Michelle, and Steve Zank as well. And the four of us, we said, how are we going to break these tracks up? Well, we kind of want them to pick the parts of the catechism that we're going to explore, right? And we didn't, Luther has the catechism hymns, that sort of played an influence, but we didn't want it to necessarily come across like, hey, we are here just setting the catechism to music. We wanted to make a piece of art that represented the various portions of the catechism, and in a way dives into them that is different than perhaps people have heard before, but communicates the concept. And so we also wanted to, the catechism is a lot of, what does this mean? Asking and answering. And we wanted the record, and hopefully, or maybe you don't hear this, but that's what we wanted the record to do, a little bit of ask the question, answer the question, but not necessarily in a very direct way. We do have that portion right on the Old Adam, New Adam track where Flame is being asked the question, and then we're pulling that piece, and that's a very literal asking and answering. But we wanted it to be something that artfully expressed the different parts of the catechism. And so for Jim, one of the things he said is you have to start with the promise. So we sort of introed the project, and then we went to the promise, right? And then we explored the rest of the catechism from there. So and we wanted to do it in a way that wasn't necessarily just hip hop, but explored sort of multiple genres throughout, with with that hip hop being the also kind of running throughout the whole record.
I actually had a question on that because I think that that's sort of one of the more intriguing and fascinating appeals to the album. So like what I think about is like, the first time I'd ever had the Mexican dish mole, and someone described it to me as chicken and chocolate, which does not sound like it's something that should go together, but actually, works really, really well and tastes really, really good. And when you think of like Lutheran theology and hip hop, it's sort of that juxtaposition at first. You're like, wait, I don't know if those things are supposed to go together. Lutheran's like pasty white German and Scandinavian people, and hip hop's like music from the street. Like, I don't understand how this is coming together. But it does have, the album does have stuff beyond hip hop. But my question is like, how much do you think that, and I might be overthinking this, which wouldn't be the first time, but how much do you think the genre of the individual songs that you've picked is somehow part of the preaching of the album? Does the genre contribute to what you're trying to say in a way where, say, hip hop can do this better? And like, again, I'm no hip hop expert at all, but my very broad understanding of it is, it comes from kind of speaking the truth of the street that no one was really doing and listening to, and it became a way to deal with that trauma and with everything that was going on. So it has this raw kind of a truth-telling nature to it, which now, of course, it's been commercialized and you have, Justin Bieber singing it and everything. But I mean, originally its roots. So I guess I'm asking, like, when you think about doing these different songs and these different genres, but the umbrella or the foundation being hip hop, is there something about this genre that you think is contributing in a unique way to the message or the way that the message is being preached?
Yeah, I think that's a perceptive question, man. I feel like, to your point, hip hop has always been very black and white. This is what we believe, take it or leave it. And so that, I think, pairs well with just the clarity of the good news of Jesus Christ. So just sort of putting that in your face. This is what it is. I think also just the nature of the cadence and repetition, sort of it helps with memorizing things. So once you sort of get a hold of the lyrics in that cadence, it sort of sticks. So I think it works well for that. So in that way, in my mind, I was like, because at first I was sort of reluctant too. I was kind of like, man, the collaboration of sounds, this is going to be something you have to babysit, because each audience is going to be looking for something authentic to their genre in the project. So if we drop the ball there, we could lose the audience. So I think, between all of us, Michelle and Blake and Steve, myself, we really want to babysit each genre and keep something authentic about it. But overall, I think, sort of hip hop being a through line allows you to say a lot in a short period of time too. So you can sort of compact a bunch of ideas and thoughts, and really kind of walk through some of the major themes of Luther's Small Catechism in a 2.5, 3 minute span. And I think rap really leads to that kind of outcome. So that was the fun part, was really just sort of trying to capture the spirit of the words in the Small Catechism, sort of paving the way and maybe even piquing the interest. So like if you listen to the project and you say, this is what the Small Catechism is all about, then you would probably want to read it and then discover in it the themes in the song. So in that way, it's like a bridge to actually diving into the content in the catechism. So that was fun to pull that all together too.
There were certainly too some songs that we said, like, this one's going to be rap heavy because we have a lot we want to teach on this. And then like the Table of Duties track, where we're like, we want this to feel more earthy, folksy. So it's going to just be kind of a light acoustic kind of feel, and they're like birds chirping in the background because we want it to just feel like you're sitting on your front porch kind of aspect. So the ones I think that were like, we want this to be more didactic and just like teaching heavy, definitely were the hip hop tracks is what we leaned into for that.
Well, I think it's it's good you said that, because I think for listeners, it's always good to be reminded, especially coming from someone like me who has zero musical talent, right? That, making an album like this, is an artistic endeavor, like you just said, like adding the bird tracks in, and we're choosing this one to be rap and this one to be folksy, and but like you're really trying to shepherd people somewhere so that the lyrics have like their own life to them, that they really almost like you think about them because you don't have to think about them, if I could say it that way. Like, obviously you want people to meditate on what it is, but because it's coming through music and not like a pure lecture like format, your defenses are down. You're not trying to reason it all out. You're kind of enjoying it, but it's also kind of working on you at the same time. And I think the deliberateness of the artistic quality is really important. And people should know that there's a lot of intention behind this and a lot of artistry and how these things are put together.
For sure.
Yeah, I think you guys put together, I saw it behind the scenes sort of video, or it was the trailer for it as well. And I'll probably try to get that in the show notes as well. It's on YouTube, on 1517's YouTube. And because it does show, I think it does put a glimpse into that. You can see how many people were involved in this. The thing I was left with watching the trailer that was put together was this was a lot of work. Like, this was a lot of work. And so I think, too, that would be one of my sort of recommendations to people, and why you could recommend, hey, give this a shot, even if you're an old German Lutheran who doesn't, the hip-hop station is not what your car is turned on to. I think you should do this because there was a lot of work put into communicating the Catechism through this medium, and it's done in a way that I think is quite balanced between doctrinal teaching and listenability. Because I've always been very hesitant about listening to Christian music. I listen to almost zero Christian music. Probably a surprise to Thinking Fellows listeners. I mostly listen to hip hop. It's generational, likely because of that, but that's mostly what I listen to. And the reason why is it always feels like Christian music is trying to tell me who to be. It's always trying to tell me who to be, or it's a projection of who I really am, or something like that. It feels like a forced good work. And I think there's a tangible difference with something like this, where the teaching is about freedom and is not about projecting that the listeners are Christian people, if that makes sense. It's actually trying to there's a difference in teaching you something and teaching you what to do, or telling, or a mechanism of being the right kind of person. That makes sense.
Love that. And that's so interesting you say that too, because I remember approaching songs thinking, okay, I want to be vulnerable. I want to approach these songs as if like you're hearing the sort of articulation of a broken person who's just sort of venting outward this frailty within, and how I'm trying to access this good news. So I wanted a lot of the songs write it from that vantage point. Probably the most teaching is Old Man, New Man. That's the one where you sort of really get into sort of boasting in Christ. There's that bravado there. But even in that, it was like at the end of the song, I wanted to make sure I said that the new man, only reason I won this battle against the old man is because I have a strong savior. It's not like, look at me, I'm now overcoming all of these things because I've made this resolve to just be a better person. It's like, even in that battle where I sort of had to have that bravado, I want to make sure people knew it's not me, the artist or the person, the character in the song, but it's actually what Christ has accomplished. So that was something that was important to me, because I'm thinking too about the audience. I'm like, I want people that are outside of the Lutheran space to hear it. I want non-Christians to hear it. And I want those who are just sort of caught up in the middle to be able to find themselves in a record, their regular, broken, disintegrated, fragmented self, and to be able to be vulnerable and to hear what God has to say about you, for you, in hopes that would draw them into, obviously God himself is good news for us, but checking out the Catechism, to me, that'll be a great thing to hear from people. I actually went to read the Catechism because of the small Catechism, because of the project. That would be a win too.
Yeah, I think there's something kind of unique about that, where you could listen to this album without knowing what the small Catechism is. You could listen to a couple tracks on Spotify, and just, listen to good music, or this could be used in a way that is complementary to the Catechism, or in fact leads somebody with questions to it. And there is something good about that for Lutherans in particular, where there isn't a prerequisite to understanding or listening, because in a lot of ways, sometimes and it's been good in some senses for preserving doctrine and teaching and stuff, but sometimes we're unwilling to let people get a taste unless they're willing to order the whole plate, and so I think there's good ways in which you could say it's not the right word because it's negative, but you can be a little subversive, right? Where somebody can be getting the goods without knowing it. Christians of backgrounds who do not agree with Lutherans on, say, baptism, can listen to your new man, old man thing and probably get a ton of benefit. A lot, maybe even for a lot of people of certain backgrounds, a lot more benefit than me, pointy-headed theologian sitting there and arguing with them about what the simile really means. So there's something good about that and complementary about that, when we also spend a lot of time and energy really clarifying and teaching doctrine in a formal way.
I love that. Genius. You about to say something, Blake? I saw you, man.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you mentioned sort of you move away from Christian music, and I think there's a sort of a genre of Christian music that can come across a little disingenuous in terms of maybe content lyrically or production or both. And it was just really important to us that when we made this, that was an honest piece of art, and honest both theologically, but also we wanted to musically create something that even if somebody who wasn't Lutheran, wasn't Christian, maybe tuned in, they think, man, these tracks are worth engaging with. Obviously, the material itself is distinctly Christian, right? But we wanted to produce something that hopefully felt like, man, that's good art as well. So hopefully we accomplished that, and I certainly think that Flame was, especially in the rap, very very open and real. So
yeah, for sure. And even he wouldn't mind me saying this, the mixing engineer who actually was behind the scenes making sure all the balance of the sounds where they need to be. I've been knowing this guy since I was a teenager, and to my knowledge, to this date, he is not a Christian. And but he's just an amazing guy. We have a great friendship. We've been friends forever, it seems like. And he just thoroughly enjoyed the project. I mean, he just was texting, I love this song, I love this arrangement. So just the art and the content for him was just a pleasant journey. I mean, he's sharing it with people, like, check this out, this is fire. Like, he's just so engaged in the project, and you could feel that the way the music turned out. I mean, you could tell he cared about the process of making it sound good. So in that way, that was another win. It was one of those things where he didn't feel like there was this line drawn between him and religion or him and God. He was able to sort of submerge himself in our world, so to speak, and find something pleasant there. And so, yeah, I think that's the goal of trying to sort of adorn the good news with other good, beautiful things. And you have to care about that, because people that don't have an appetite for this content, they may still really enjoy art and critique art. And a way to serve them is to show them, I speak your language. I value good art as well. I care about words and song structure and transitions and those kind of things. And that sort of softens the heart. And I think in that is a vocational action as well. So we want to sort of babysit all those steps from A to Z, you know?
What do you...
Oh, go for it. No, go for it, Bruce.
I was going to say, what do you say to someone who's listening who, isn't from a Lutheran background, maybe is like you are Flame Reformed, or maybe they're Baptist, or maybe they're Catholic, or whatever else, and they're listening to the podcast and they go, okay, this sounds interesting, but is the point of this like a surreptitious way to try to make me a Lutheran, or was this made for Lutherans to use in the church? Like it's really more of a Lutheran thing that others can listen in on. Is that what the point of this is? Like what do you say to the person who maybe wants to share it with their non-Lutheran friend, or who is not Lutheran themselves and is maybe nervous or put off by the idea that this is like just teaching the catechism? What value would they then take from it if they have no interest in being a Lutheran, but they're interested in the project?
Yeah. I got something to say. What about you, Blake? That's a good question.
Go for it. Yeah, I'll chime in after you answer.
No, I think people should use it the way they would use anything good. You use anything good for what it's because it's good, and there are things that you'll find useful in it. There may be things that may not match where you are in life at this point, but yeah, use it.
I think that answer so much in this sense, because it sounds simple, but what it tells me is the goal was to make good music. And yes. I do think that is, from like my comment about Christian music before, I don't think you always get that. Now that might be the goal for a lot of, I'm not friends with a lot of artists. The two artists I see on the screen are the two musical artists I talk to regularly. So I'm related to church musicians, but in their churches and stuff. So not doing, commercial art. But it just echoes sort of that freedom of Lutheranism, right? That the goal here was, I'm going to make good music. And I'm going to make good music with a solid foundation and inspiration, and in such a way that people who are kind of in the know about why this is good can use it for particular ways. But I'm out to make good music. And we've talked about this kind of thing on vocation episodes before on this show as well, where it's like when people are sent into the world to do their vocations, even if it's not artist, if it's like banker or office manager, whatever, when you're doing that job, you should be focusing on doing that well, right? Like you should be a good banker, you should be a good office manager, you should be a good employee, like the table of duties, right? You should do these things well, and it is by that you will have access to people's hearts and ears and all that other thing, rather than, like forcing some sort of Christian issue into everything good. So I do like that answer.
It's true. Well said. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's fairly true to say that, a lot of times songs come together to shape albums, or there's an idea for an album, right? And then you write songs with that idea in mind. And so our idea was odd or unique or whatever, however you want to describe it, right, for this album. But our intention was still, like, I think the same as whenever I sit down to write music, I want to write songs about real things, not just like this is going to be a great Coke commercial, or like Barry Manilow, different kind of songwriting.
It was about his dog, not his girlfriend, and everybody sounded like.
Did you guys table or scrap any songs, like, or a bunch of them, or how did that? Like in this pursuit of good, what, like, there had to be a chopping block.
Yeah.
Right.
When we got into the studio, when we initially came in, I said, okay, guys, here's the premise, no bad ideas. And so that first day, we said, throw everything out. Then
Mean Blake came back the next day and was like, here's all the bad ideas.
And then I was like, everything you guys wrote. No, just kidding.
Scratch it.
Yeah. So then we started to say, okay, which ones do we want to move forward with? So we did. And then, but even still, we like the old Adam, new Adam track. That was a completely different song. I don't know, 4 months ago. We said, actually, Michelle said, guys, or maybe it was you, Flame. One of you said, this isn't true to the genre of music we're trying to create of a battle rap. And so there was a chorus hook that theologically explored what an old man is, what the new man is, you know. And we said, you guys were like, this isn't working. And we had to be willing to hold that with an open hand and go, man, we spent so much time working on this song, and just go, nope, there it goes, right? And say, that's not working for this, so here's a new one. I mean, I've got a bunch of voice memos that we either completely rewrote, or we said, this is interesting, but not it. So, and I know Flame had versions of the various raps. So there's like writing and rewriting. So.
Yeah, it's intense. And it would have been different, again, if we were each working on our own particular genre. But man, just sort of dancing in between each other's worlds and that sort of nexus, that was probably the trickiest thing. So again, shout out to Michelle, who to me kind of sort of sits in the center as the guy who has a good grasp on a few different genres of music. I mean, he's a band teacher. He plays classical music, but he also produces hip hop. So he's just that eclectic kind of personality. So I tip my hat to him in many ways. But this it sort of just reflects life. It's kind of like you make plans and things come up and you adjust. So in that way, the arts are really sort of a reflection of that. And I think, as we sort of carved off the fat, I think we just made a lean project. And I'm hearing great responses, man. I'm hearing people that are just enjoying it as good music. Like I said, whether they're Christian or not, I'm hearing people talk about, particularly people that come from the world that I came from. So the first song, The Promise, is sort of just, it threw a lot of people into shock from the world that I came from, because the chorus pushes people past where they're comfortable in the space I came from, in a reform space. So
much more assurance of your election, of the promise actually delivering salvation, right?
Yeah. So to say, to ask God, can you keep your promise when I've been unfaithful? I mean, people would never fix their mouths to ask that question in the circle I came from, because in that space they would fear, oh my God, what things will happen beyond that question. All bad things. Don't even explore that. But in this record, we were able to push people to the limits the Bible pushes them to. And you have to feel that. You need to sit in that, because the Holy Spirit chose to put that space in the Bible, and you got to wrestle with it.
Do you see a space for envisioning people using this during catechesis? Do you see a teaching aid space, or maybe as, some other like teaching mechanism for this? I know it adds to the fact that, you're making good music first, you're starting with a good foundation. But that's, oftentimes when we talk about Christian music too, there's also uses of that in certain spaces. And a lot of people who listen to this, this music isn't going to be used in worship and service time. So is there a use in churches, though, where you envision there's a space where it's definitely both safe and good to use this without sort of rocking the boat too much?
We've got a few different resources that will come out to accompany this, and sort of our intention is that they will sort of meet you at the level of engagement that you would like. So this is not meant to replace, catechesis class. This isn't meant as a substitute for anything, but we want the songs to be something that you can engage with. Okay, do you want to explore that topic? Then if you want to dig deeper, we're developing study guides that will go along with each track that are written by a different teacher or theologian. And in addition to that, there's going to be a podcast that accompanies you that will discuss both the production and the theology. So you can kind of engage with the track at the level you want to. If you just want to listen to the music and enjoy it for that, it'll also be out on vinyl. But, so then if you want to dig deeper, do the study guide with your teacher, with your class, listen to the podcast, kind of engage with all three of those things. That's the hope. It's not meant to replace anything, but sort of supplement it. I was at a church in Islip, New York, and I was talking to the youth guy there, and he was telling me that he was using Flame's material to supplement the teaching in a class with the youth group. And I thought, man, this is awesome. And I have to think that that's probably what sort of maybe sparked some of the idea of maybe we head down this road of the Catechism. But that's a hope.
Yeah, we're getting close here, but I'll have sort of this closing question for you, but it comes with a story, right? So memorizing and rereading the Catechism is a huge part of it, right? Catechesis is that sort of first opportunity for people to memorize it, and happens at a young age. And then maybe you go on and, you've got the details sort of are getting fuzzier and fuzzier, but the core elements are maybe staying with you. And so something like this helps you be encouraged to memorize it. And we have stories like from Jim, who, a lot of his teaching of the Catechism just came from the fact that he just very sort of faithfully through his life regularly read it, memorized it, and meditated on it, sort of morning after morning and things like that. And I was recently, I forget where I was. I think it was, okay, so I have 4 kids and now, and for baby number 4 is the first time I've ever taken a birthing class, which seems really out of order, right? So my wife and I were sort of forced into it because we have so much family help and generational wisdom that it just didn't really seem necessary at the time. And thankfully for us, because of that, it wasn't. But this last time, the way we did it, we were forced to by it. And it was pretty okay. But then at the end, the lady wanted everybody to sit and meditate with her, which terrified me. Because it was all like, find the truth in yourself and search the silence. And, being a somewhat decent theologian, I knew nothing good comes from inside myself. Like, you do not search for the truth inside yourself. The only truth comes extranos, outside of yourself. That's the only good truth. Soul searching, bad. You're only going to find sin. And so instead of meditating, I sat there and quietly recited the 10 Commandments in my head with the explanations from Luther's Catechism, because it was the only thing I could think of. As I was sitting there, I was like, what can I do to not soul search in this minute? And it was just that. That was the only thing that came to mind. So as you guys were doing this, I'm sure you had to revisit the Catechism, especially as you were writing lyrics, and sort of check yourself. Was there a part of this that, like, there's now a standout part of the Catechism to you that is just not, like, is going to be hard to shake away, that you've had to revisit this? Is there a part that you maybe even see different now, that you had to take it, synthesize it, adapt it, and turn it into music?
That's good. Well, firstly, that story is hilarious. Thank you for sharing that. But no, I think for me, it was the Lord's Prayer. So something that, I committed to memory a long time ago as a kid. And if I'm honest, I don't think I ever really thought deeply about it. Just something that I sort of learned and just stored away. But working through it, I was really able to appreciate it, one, to think a bit more deeper about it, and to see the usefulness of it. So even when I wrote the song, I was like, I was more so into what Jesus was after with sort of instructing us on how to think about prayer and how to pray, in fact. So that was one of the things that was one of my major takeaways. And obviously reading through Nestigan's material on the Lord's Prayer was helpful. Even Kolb's material. So that was, for me, I just really locked in on the Lord's Prayer in a new way. So now even when I say it during divine service, I had that special touch point with having exercised it in my mind and in my heart, and then having to put it to song, sort of into poetry. So to engage it that way for me was special. So it's not just this thing I memorized because my grandmother wanted me to, but I could pray those prayers with more meaning,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I don't think it was necessarily a specific part of the Catechism as much as it was reshaping my understanding of the Catechism. Because I dug into books that I had not read before, like Free to Be was one of them, and Bob Kolb's book on teaching God's children. And so many of those, like, I won't say I had a legalistic confirmation experience, but I had a legalistic confirmation experience at least one of the years that I was in confirmation. And that shaped the Catechism in my brain a little bit. So it was a joy to sort of rewrite that understanding, even though, like, obviously as part of 1517, we're, constantly sharing this message of freedom in Christ, right? But to reorient my view of the Catechism in that way, really through Jim's lens, I think was liberating, and also gave me more of an appreciation for then sections when we approached like the table of duties and what that meant, and things no longer become lists to memorize, but become gifts.
Yeah, I hope that part of this is putting the Catechism back into people's lives outside of confirmation class. And I don't want people hear me, digging on confirmation class too much here. But there's a sense in which, the Catechism, when Luther does reorient it, because the pieces of the Catechism were, handed down from the ancient church and things like that.
Sure.
But Luther reorients it, and he reorients it in a way to make it a teaching in the household way, right? And as time went on, in many ways, it got further and further from the household. And for a lot of us, became something maybe you only interacted with at church for those couple of years, right? And like you said, Blake, there is even some accident where it could be a carrot on a stick as access to communion, right? And things like that. And again, not intentional, not saying we shouldn't do it, but there's a lot of ways in which revisiting the Catechism and the truths that it teach apart from that whole system later in life is good and freeing in many ways, and helps you reorient it and absorb it apart from this goal of, I'm getting confirmed in my church, right? I'm becoming a member, I'm becoming a communicant, I have all these goals. Now it's something you can actually just receive apart from any goals. So I hope the album does contribute to that a bit.
Love that.
So, well, guys, thank you for joining us. It was great to have you on the show. Freedom Lessons is available now wherever you stream music. I'll put links to all the places that we need to get it in the show notes. I think, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, places like that, definitely at the top of the list. And we'll also put in the information about those further resources that Blake was talking about as well.
And you can actually find a lot of that stuff at 1517.org/freedom lessons.
Very simple. Nice and to the point. We got those beautiful landing pages, probably built by Grant. And
that's right.
Yeah, that's right. So those are high quality, and they will get you exactly where you need to go. We appreciate you listening to this episode of the podcast. If you'd like to find out more, you can go to 1517.org/podcast. And if you'd like to support the Thinking Fellows and the rest of 1517 and things that we do, like music, freedom lessons as well, you can go to 1517.org/donate or follow the Support This Show link in the podcast. We thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time. Bye.